Humanity suffers from a deeply ingrained, almost incurable psychological delusion regarding our own intelligence. We believe that by looking upward, by fixing our gaze upon the infinite, starry expanse of the cosmos, we somehow transcend our earthly limitations. We operate under the arrogant, intoxicating assumption that our advanced mathematics and our gleaming rockets elevate us above the absolute, unforgiving laws of basic physics. We view the vacuum of space not as an ancient, incredibly hostile and deadly abyss, but merely as a new ocean waiting patiently to be conquered by our machinery. But the physical universe is utterly indifferent to our grand ambitions. It does not care about national pride. It does not care about political ideologies. And it is entirely, ruthlessly intolerant of human impatience. When we construct our magnificent vessels of exploration, we are essentially building highly complex, fragile life support bubbles. But if we allow arrogance and the desperate rush for supremacy to dictate the blueprints, those magnificent vessels will instantly, violently mutate into inescapable, locked, and heavily armored tombs. This is not just a story of a tragic accident on a launch pad. This is the chilling, deeply claustrophobic story of what happens when a nation's blinding hubris constructs a flawless, ticking time bomb. The year is 1967. The geopolitical landscape of the entire planet is fiercely gripped by the freezing, paranoid, and highly competitive tension of the Cold War. The United States of America and the Soviet Union are locked in a bitter, absolute struggle for global supremacy. But this war is not being fought solely in the jungles or on the oceans. The ultimate battlefield has shifted to the absolute silence of the upper atmosphere. The space race. To the politicians and the military generals, space was no longer a realm of pure, peaceful scientific discovery. It was the ultimate high ground, a psychological weapon of mass intimidation. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy had made a monumental, impossibly aggressive public declaration. He promised the world that America would successfully land a human being on the surface of the moon and return him safely to the Earth before the decade was out. It was a bold, visionary promise, but in the cold, hard mathematics of aerospace engineering, a politically mandated deadline is an incredibly dangerous variable. A deadline forces men to rush. A deadline forces brilliant minds to ignore the quiet, subtle warnings of the physical world. And a deadline completely strips away the crucial, methodical patience required to safely navigate the void. To achieve this impossible goal, NASA developed the Apollo program. It was an undertaking of unprecedented, colossal scale and expense. And for the very first, highly anticipated crewed mission, designated as Apollo 1, the agency selected 3 of their absolute finest: Command Pilot Virgil Gus Grissom, Senior Pilot Ed White, and Pilot Roger Chaffee. These men were not merely astronauts, they were the flawless, highly trained, and deeply revered heroes of the American Empire. They had dedicated their entire lives to pushing the absolute boundaries of human flight. But the machine they were assigned to fly, the Apollo Command Module, was fundamentally, deeply compromised. The Command Module was an incredibly cramped, heavily armored, cone-shaped capsule. Claustrophobia is traditionally defined as the irrational fear of confined spaces. But inside the Apollo capsule, claustrophobia was not a psychological fear. It was a terrifying physical reality. The 3 astronauts were tightly strapped into their couches, surrounded by thousands of mechanical dials, heavy toggle switches, and miles of intricate electrical wiring. There was barely enough room to move their arms. But the true apocalyptic horror of the command module was not its size, it was its atmosphere. In the ruthless mathematics of rocket science, weight is the absolute enemy. Every single ounce counts. To save weight, to simplify the complex life support systems, the engineers made a highly controversial, fatal design choice. They decided to pressurize the internal cabin of the capsule with 100% pure oxygen. They did not mix it with nitrogen. Like the natural air we breathe on Earth, pure oxygen is, of course, a breathable, life-sustaining gas. But in the strict, unyielding laws of chemistry, pure, highly pressurized oxygen is also the most volatile, aggressive, and deadly accelerant in the known universe. It radically alters the fundamental flammability of every single material it touches. In a 100% oxygen environment, objects that are normally entirely fireproof suddenly become highly explosive. Aluminum burns, steel can ignite, and inside the cramped, tightly sealed Apollo capsule, the astronauts were surrounded by an extensive network of highly flammable materials. The cabin was lined with vast quantities of nylon netting. There were dozens of square feet of a new, highly convenient fastening material known as Velcro scattered across the walls. Furthermore, hiding quietly beneath the floorboards and behind the metal panels were over 30 miles of complex, bundled electrical wiring. Due to the frantic, rushed pace of the manufacturing process, much of this wiring was severely damaged, stripped of its protective Teflon coating, and left dangerously exposed. The capsule was not a spacecraft. It was an intricately designed, heavily pressurized powder keg, patiently waiting for a single microscopic spark. And yet, there was one final, utterly devastating design flaw that would seal the fate of the three men. The main hatch of the capsule, the only entry and exit point, was a heavy, complex, multi-piece steel door. To ensure an absolute airtight seal in the vacuum of space, the engineers designed the hatch to open inward. This meant that the higher the pressure inside the cabin, the tighter the heavy steel door was forced against its frame. This meant that the higher the pressure inside the cabin, the tighter the heavy steel door was forced against its frame. In the event of an emergency, the astronauts could not simply push the door open. They first had to manually reach up, open a pressure equalization valve, wait for the internal pressure to drop, and then unbolt the heavy latches. Even under perfectly calm, completely normal conditions, this complex mechanical procedure took an exhausting 90 seconds to complete. In a crisis, the Apollo command module was completely, permanently inescapable. The date is January 27, 1967. The location is Cape Kennedy, Florida. Launch Complex 34, sitting majestically on the launch pad, is the colossal, towering silhouette of the unfueled Saturn 1B rocket. At the very top of this massive mechanical titan, strapped tightly inside the command module, are Grissom, White, and Chaffee. They are conducting a routine, highly tedious plugs-out test. The rocket is not fueled. They are not going to space today. It is merely a simulated countdown. Because the rocket is completely empty of fuel, NASA officially classifies the test as non-hazardous. There are no emergency fire rescue teams on standby. There are no medical units waiting at the base of the tower. The illusion of safety on the ground is absolute. But inside the capsule, the test is a deeply frustrating, exhausting nightmare. From the moment they sealed the hatch, the highly complex communication system has been plagued with severe, maddening static. The astronauts cannot clearly hear the control room. The control room cannot hear the astronauts. The microphones constantly cut out, replaced by sharp, high-frequency hissing and electronic interference. Gus Grissom, deeply annoyed by the failing technology, voices his frustration into the static. How are we going to get to the moon if we can't talk between 2 or 3 buildings? It is a chilling, prophetic question, echoing through the pressurized void. The time is approaching 6:30 in the evening. The cabin is fully pressurized with pure 100% oxygen. The 3 men are lying in their heavy, bulky spacesuits, trying to troubleshoot the relentless communication glitch. At exactly 6:31, the absolute, unforgiving laws of chemistry are triggered. Deep beneath the seat of Gus Grissom, near an environmental control unit, a tiny, frayed and exposed copper wire brushes against a metal panel. A completely silent, microscopic spark of electricity jumps across the gap in the dark. On an ordinary day, in normal atmospheric air, this tiny spark would have harmlessly fizzled out and died. But in an atmosphere of pure, highly pressurized oxygen, that microscopic spark is a weapon of mass destruction. The spark aggressively, violently touches a nearby piece of frayed nylon netting. In a fraction of a millisecond, the invisible chemical reaction begins. Through the heavy, distorted static of the communication channel, a sudden, panicked voice pierces the silence of the control room. It is the voice of an astronaut, shouting a single terrifying word: "Fire!" Seconds later, the voice of Ed White crackles through the speaker, filled with absolute, primal dread. "We've got a fire in the cockpit." The slow burn instantly mutates into a massive, aggressive, blinding flash of pure, unnatural thermal energy. The flames violently consume the highly flammable Velcro, the nylon nets, and the plastic tubing. In a pure oxygen environment, fire does not merely burn, it behaves like an explosive detonation. The fire aggressively sweeps across the ceiling of the cramped cabin, a roaring, blindingly bright tsunami of thermal annihilation. Within 10 seconds, the temperature inside the tiny sealed metal capsule skyrockets to an incomprehensible 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The true absolute horror of claustrophobia is realized in its purest form. The three men are locked inside a heavily armored, pitch-black oven, surrounded by roaring fire. Ed White, operating entirely on desperate survival instinct, reaches up toward the heavy steel hatch above his head. On the black and white television monitors in the control room, technicians watch in paralyzed horror as White's arms frantically struggle with the latches. But the internal pressure of the fire has aggressively sealed their fate. The rapidly expanding gases have pushed the internal pressure of the capsule so high that the inward opening hatch is permanently, solidly locked against its frame. It is physically, mathematically impossible for human muscles to pull that door open. They are buried alive in the sky. On the gantry outside, terrified technicians see the bright, blinding flash of fire illuminating the tiny windows of the capsule. They rush desperately toward the sealed module, entirely unprepared for the nightmare unfolding before them. At 6:31 and 17 seconds, the immense apocalyptic internal pressure violently breaches the heavy hull of the spacecraft. The metal physically tears open, and a massive, terrifying wave of thick, toxic, pitch-black smoke and searing heat aggressively explodes outward onto the launch pad. The sudden release of pressure acts like a blowtorch, throwing the technicians backward, burning their skin and singeing their hair. Civilly explodes outward onto the launch pad. But despite the flames, the brave crew on the outside desperately tries to reach the hatch. They are not wearing oxygen masks. They are not wearing fireproof suits. They are breathing in deeply toxic, suffocating black smoke as they frantically burn their bare hands, trying to open the heavy steel door. But the heat is too intense. The smoke is too blinding. Inside the capsule, the roaring fire lasted for only a few fleeting seconds because the fire aggressively, violently, consumed every single molecule of oxygen available in the sealed cabin, for only a few fleeting seconds. The intense heat rapidly melted the plastic breathing tubes of the astronauts' spacesuits. It is a grim, deeply tragic medical reality that the astronauts did not burn to death. When the fire devoured the oxygen, it instantly replaced it with a massive, lethal concentration of carbon monoxide and highly toxic gases from the melting plastics. In the pitch-black, silent, suffocating darkness of the capsule, the three heroes of the American Empire asphyxiated. They were poisoned by the very machine built to carry them to the stars. It took the agonizingly slow technicians a full 5 minutes to finally pry the heavy, blackened hatch open. But it was far too late. When the smoke finally cleared from the cramped, completely ruined interior, the technicians found a scene of profound, liminal devastation. The pristine white interior of the spaceship had been entirely reduced to a dark, melted, blackened, and ash-covered tomb. Grissom, White, and Chaffee were found still strapped into their seats. They had been killed not by the vacuum of space, but by the overwhelming arrogance of their own engineering on the launch pad. The Apollo 1 disaster sent a profound, humiliating, and terrifying shockwave through the global aerospace community. The United States government, humbled by the apocalyptic cost of their impatience, completely halted the Apollo program. They were forced to publicly admit that their desperate political rush for the moon had blindly sacrificed the lives of their finest men. The spacecraft was entirely redesigned. The fatal inward opening hatch was permanently discarded, replaced by an outward opening door that could be blown off in seconds. The highly volatile, 100% pure oxygen environment on the launch pad was strictly eliminated, replaced by a safe, Earth-like mixture of nitrogen and oxygen. But these vital, life-saving lessons were written entirely in blood and ash. The ruins of the Apollo 1 command module were locked away in a dark, secure storage facility, a silent, hidden monument to the fatal cost of human hubris. We build magnificent rockets, and we arrogantly reach for the heavens, believing we are invincible. But the physical universe is endlessly patient. It will always find the frayed wire. It will always find the spark. History is not dead. It is never dead. It merely slumbers inside the dark, melted and silent metal capsules of our forgotten past, patiently waiting to be remembered. We will meet again in the next era, when humanity once more forgets the terrifying silent warnings written in pure oxygen and locked doors. You are watching Past Resurrected. Until the next era,